People's Republic of China. Ginulat ni Pangulong Bongbong Marcos nang biglang pinaresbak si Kishida. Base sa balitang kumakalat, mismong Japan Prime Minister nang nagsalita na handang resbakan si Pangulong Bongbong Marcos ng Prime Minister ng Japan. Ayon kay Kishida, handang ibigay ng Japanese ang mahigit 12 barko sa Philippine Coast Guard matapos magbigay ang radar para hindi mabangga ang PCG ng Chinese Coast Guard. Dagdag pa ni Kishida, laking pasalamat kay Pangulong Marcos dahil ginawang golden age ang relasyong Japan at Pilipinas.
Japan has hitherto provided 12 ships to the Coast Guard to play a part in improving the Philippines' maritime security capability. Also, yesterday, Japan agreed with the Philippines to provide coastal surveillance radars to the Philippines Navy. Japan will continue to contribute to the enhancement of the Philippines' security capabilities, thereby contributing to regional peace and stability.
Build the friendly relationship we enjoy today. Today, Japan-Philippine relationship have reached the point of being called a golden age.
Through these efforts, let us protect the maritime order, which is governed by laws and rules, not by force.
Depensa pa ni Subiri, laking tulong tinawagan na ni BBM ang mga Japanese dahil kung dati US, Australia, South Korea ang pinoproblema sa atin ng China, ngayon dinagdag pa ni BBM ang Japan. Talagang dumaraming re-resback sa China.
Absolute. Alam mo, hindi naman natin kayang tapatan yung Navy ng People's Liberation Army ng China. But with this help by our allies and friends in the region, our allies in the United States, and then now Japan, which is a strategic partner and ally as well, together with South Korea, together with Australia, at least alam po nila na kung manggugulo sila dito sa atin, may mag-back up sa atin, may tutulong po sa atin. And I think that's a big deterrence. Because if we do not have that alliance, multilateral alliance with other countries, I think they would have overrun us in many of our atolls and our shoals. They would have continued their expansionist program and plan of militarizing some of our many of our atolls and shoals. We have proof that they were already reclaiming some areas. Nakita po natin and pinesent po ni Senator Tolentino to through a speech in the Senate, wherein all of a sudden wala pong isla doon, bigla na lang nagkaroon ng isla. At nakita po natin yung mga litrato na satellite video, satellite footage kung saan napakarami mga Chinese militia vessels na nandun prior to the creation of these artificial islands, as we suspect that has been happening. So if we don't do these multilateral arrangements, agreements, and alliances, sa tingin ko, mas marami pa pong reclaim itong mga kapitbahay natin sa north, the bullies in the north, within our West Philippine Sea. So, what we need to do is to push back. But to push back, in a way, Mike, na rule of law, UNCLOS. Gamitin po natin yung rule of law and freedom of navigation that is guaranteed within the UNCLOS, which China themselves are signatory to. So, kailangan natin i-reiterate yan. Ayaw po natin ng gera. Pero kailangan po natin ipakita sa buong mundo na ginagawa po ng ating kapitbahay dito sa West Philippine Sea ay labag sa UNCLOS, labag sa rule of law, at labag sa freedom of navigation. It's the first time a world leader has addressed the joint session of Congress where they reiterated a free and open Indo-Pacific, of course, a rule of law when it comes to freedom of navigation within these areas. Alam mo, hindi naman po talaga tayo magkakaproblema, Mike, pag maganda naman ang pinag-usapan with our neighbors in China. For example, if there was a code of conduct, what would be the code of conduct? You remain in your area, we remain in our territory, we do not renege our claim to this territory. It's still, for us, it is still considered part of the West Philippine Sea. It is still part of Philippine territory. Pero wag na po tayo magkaroon ng verbal threats. Wag mo nang pigilan ang ating mga mangingisda na mangisda doon sa mga lugar na yan. What's happening now, Mike, when we have Filipino fishermen going with their outriggers to these areas, sasabihin ka agad ng Chinese Coast Guard na umalis kayo dyan dahil hindi po teritoryo ng Pilipinas yan. Amin yan. And you're now violating our laws on the ownership of this or the ownership of this particular area. They're violating. In other words, nagka-trespassing daw po tayo sa sarili nating West Philippine Sea sa sarili nating coastal areas. So, yan po ang nagkakaproblema. They don't follow what you call freedom of navigation. If they only allowed our ships to go to and fro ayungin shows na walang harassment, hindi po sila nag-water cannon, hindi po sila nagbabangga ng mga barko natin, at hinahayaan lang po nila ang ating mangingisda na mangisda dyan. Maski na sino po, Malaysians, Vietnamese, pati Chinese fishermen to fish together in these areas, then we won't have a problem. Their problem is, they are claiming it as their own koi pond, parang kanilang pando yan, kanilang teritoryo yan. At tinatanggal po nila lahat ng mga barko at mangingisda at pinapalayas dito sa mga lugar na ito na kita-kita, napakaklaro naman under the arbitral ruling that is ours at within our 200-mile exclusive economic zone, and it is also just 100 nautical miles from our coast na napakalapit. So for us, it's a very significant, a milestone event when the Prime Minister addresses the joint session of Congress, makes it known to the whole world, not just to us, but to the whole world, that they are fighting for the principle of a free and open Indo-Pacific. We are 1,000% behind his statement. We believe that there should be freedom of navigation for these areas wherein 1/3 of the global trade goes through. By the way, Mike, 1/3 of the global transport and shipping goes through these particular straits within the West Philippine South China Sea area. So, kailangan talagang manatili po itong bukas sa lahat ng bansa. No? Hindi po dapat tayo nag-aaway-away na kagad-agad pag may bansang may barkong pumupunta dyan, the first item on their agenda, which is the Chinese agenda, is to warn them that they're coming into Chinese territory and that they should move out of that territory. That is not the right thing to do. And so, we appreciate what Prime Minister Kishida has done. Well, that is a decision made by the Department of National Defense. As legislators, we can only support. As a matter of fact, we've already said that we will be increasing the budgets of the Philippine Navy, Philippine Army, as well as the Philippine Coast Guard, as well as the Philippine Air Force. In this year's 2024 budget, you'll see an increase in their budgets for defense spending as well, for modernization of, or buying more ships and planes for our armed forces. So, when it comes to the policy, I believe Secretary Gilbert Chodoro has not put that off the table. He said, why not? Tinatawag po dyan, joint sales. It's called joint sales with Australia, joint sales with Japan, joint sales with South Korea. As a matter of fact, I read in the news yesterday, magkakaroon po ng joint training ang South Korea, Japan, and the Philippines next month. Can you imagine that? I think that's the first time na magkakaroon po ng cross-training and training exercises with the navies of Japan and Korea together with the Philippines. So napakaganda po nito. Nagkakaroon po tayo ng multilateral alliances around the region with like-minded nations na naniniwala in the rule of law. Hindi po dictation na lang or dictatorial tendencies and of course abuse of the rule of law and UNCLOS. So we appreciate that, we welcome it, and if you ask my personal opinion, of course I'm not the policymaker here, but my personal opinion, why not? Why not? Why not do joint sales with these like-minded countries in these particular areas to assert freedom of navigation and free and open Indo-Pacific? Actually, matagal na po natin hinihingi po to, Mike. As a matter of fact, if you look at if you Google actually all the news stories about the RAA, Reciprocal Access Agreement, it was our office, myself, who raised this issue a year ago. And I said, it's about time that we also come up with more training programs with the Japanese Navy and Coast Guard, as they've been giving us all these ships. They've already delivered, as I mentioned, 12 ships to the Philippine Coast Guard, and they'll be delivering an additional 5. Not to mention the warning radar systems, the warning and control radar systems for the Air Force and the Navy that they've already delivered for the Air Force, and they're now going to deliver next year for the Navy. We need their expertise in training for this equipment na galing po sa kanila, and vice versa. So kailangan natin magpadala ng sundalo dun sa Japan para makipag-training sa kanilang Navy and Coast Guard, at kailangan din nilang pumunta dito at makipag-training sa ating mga Coast Guard and Navy units. So definitely a reciprocal access agreement, which is similar to the visiting force agreement, would be welcome development, because yan pong magiging guideline pag may violations. Now, meron pong grupo na natatakot, for example, yung ating mga kaibigan sa kaliwa, they're very scared, no? Natatakot po sila that this might be abused. But between us, Mike, no, and to the Filipino people, isa sa pinakadisiplinadong armed forces, what they call self-defense forces, ang Japanese, ang mga Hapon. Sila ang pinakadisiplinado, not only armed forces, but they're the most disciplined people, one of the most disciplined people in the world. Linilinis nga nila yung mga stadiums pagkatapos maglaro ang kanilang football team or basketball team. Sila na mismo kusang loob. Linilinis po nila yun, napakatahimik po nila, hindi po sila nang-aabuso. They are one of the most disciplined people in the world, and their armed forces is one of the most disciplined armed forces in the world. I am not worried na magkakaroon po ng violations. And if there will be violations, the RAA will set the guidelines. No? For example, Philippine law will be followed at all times when they're in the Philippines. Pag meron po silang ginawang mali or kasalanan, they will be under the jurisdiction of Philippine law. And same goes for our Filipino troops who will visit Japan for training. Kung meron din po silang nagawa po dyan na violation, Japanese law will also be followed. And so there will be no problems. Hindi po tayo nagbibigay na undue advantage, no, which forgets the rule of law of each country. No, we respect each other's sovereign rights and sovereign laws. And under the RAA, it will only hasten, no, the entrance of trainers dito sa Philippines and Filipinos to Japan. So napakaganda po nito, Mike, because this will pave the way for a higher strategic alliance with Japan as our friendly neighbor in the north. So I think we should have no problems with that. And
Ngayon, ikaw, bilang Pilipino, ano ang masasabi mo at reaksyon sa balitang ito? Mag-iwan ka ng komento sa ibaba at atin pong babasahin isa-isa.